Welcome back. On the rundown this week in this special Correspondents edition, the governor huddles with the president once more in the Oval Office, and the president promises to deliver on 2 projects in Michigan. John James would like the governor's job. Around the OTR table, Kyle Melinn, Beth LeBlanc, Jordyn Hermani, and Chad Livengood. Sit in with us as we get the inside out. Off the Record.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Bellwether Public Relations, a full-service strategic communications agency partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and issue advocacy. Learn more at bellwetherpr.com. And now, this edition of Off the Record with Tim Skubick.
Here we go. Welcome to Studio C and welcome to Off the Record. Busy news week in Washington, D.C. The governor, the second trip to the Oval Office in less than a month. That's a new land record, isn't it?
It seems to be, yes.
Seems to be? Come on, man.
Those keeping track. We haven't seen that in quite a while in this town.
Yeah. What did you make of it?
I don't think I've seen Governor Whitmer in a situation where she's trying to kind of blend into the background
and maybe the woodwork.
Yes. So that was that photo that's been circulating online of her looking like she'd rather be anywhere else than in the Oval Office. I think that was pretty telling, and it's going to be talked about for a while here.
All right, well, let's talk about it after we see what happened in D.C. To be sure, Michigan governors in the past have conferred with the president in the Oval Office. However, never before have the viewers at home had a chance to actually hear an exchange. But Governor Gretchen Whitmer and House Republican Speaker Matt Hall were in the Oval talking with the president about keeping that ferocious Asian carp out of Lake Michigan and bringing more fighter jets to Selfridge Air Base in Macomb County. The president, who once had a public dispute with the governor over COVID, put all of that aside with something nice to say about her.
We're honored to have Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan, great state of Michigan, and she's really done an excellent job.
Republican Speaker Hall thanked the president for help on the carp problem and making a commitment to beef up Selfridge Field.
We couldn't get Joe Biden to do anything about either one of these issues, particularly Selfridge Air Force Base.
We'll all stand there together and cut a ribbon, okay? Gretchen, good. That's good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, the governor spoke to the president about the impact of the carp in Lake Michigan.
It's why we're working so hard to make sure that, we work with the Army Corps and erect a barrier so that the Asian carp can't get into Lake Michigan. It'll devastate the ecosystem, the economy, tourism, and it's 20% of the world's fresh waters in the Great Lakes, Mr. President,
This was Governor Whitmer's second visit to the Oval Office in less than a month. Back home this day, she reflects that the president's tariffs, however, on foreign cars and parts is not such a good deal.
From what I'm most concerned about is the average individual who's lost so much money, who's at risk of losing their job because of business decisions to cut their workforce so they can survive. It's individuals who are going to get left behind.
All right, so Kyle, what did you make of this?
Well, when you play with fire, sometimes you get singed a little bit. She was going to D.C. to try and draw attention to, herself, but also the tariff issue. And so she got in front of some business leaders, made a speech about how we got to return to manufacturing to build planes, ships, chips, and airplanes. And so she gave the speech, and she said we got to scale back on the tariffs. The tariffs are too tough. Tariffs are a blunt object, and they shouldn't just be used to hammer away at people. And then she also had this interview or this meeting with the president where she thought she was just going to be one-on-one with the president, get some FaceTime, talk about tariffs, talk about Selfridge, talk about northern Michigan and the ice storm. And then I guess he was running late or something, and they told him, hey, just come on in right now. And so lo and behold, he had this press conference that you had in the setup piece, and she's like, and so she was completely caught off guard, tried to make the best of the situation. But while he was there, he was signing executive orders that she was not in support of. He signed some document going after some guy who called out Trump for saying 2020 election was a fraud. And she's like, I don't have anything to do with this. I don't know what to do with this. So it did create kind of an uncomfortable situation for her. But I mean, you got to give her credit for wanting to be in D.C. and trying to get FaceTime with the president. But, she's not in control of that schedule. And when you're not in control of your own schedule, it could create a hairy situation.
And I think, especially for Governor Whitmer, if you think about a lot of her national exposure over the years, it's been from behind her own lectern at her own press conferences or in very controlled situations. This was not. And so I think it was an interesting foray into the national scene in a very uncontrolled situation.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a really interesting either pivot point in Whitmer's time with dealing with Trump. She obviously has to do, as governor of Michigan, we are uniquely impacted. We are potentially going to be the epicenter of these tariffs if they ever go back into effect. After that 90-day pause, we have to be able to maintain some level of diplomacy between the White House and Michigan. But obviously she wants to really control that message. She wants to show herself as this bipartisan, able to work across the aisle, get things done. I mean, also looks nice if you're considering running for president, potentially.
She's not running for president, Jordyn.
There's still a lot of time between now and the next election, but
I think she just blew me off. I'm not sure.
But all I'm saying is that it's really difficult to both have your cake and eat it too. You can't come across as somebody who's trying to be this bipartisan reach across the aisle, but then also expect to continue to curry favor. A lot of Democrats gave her a lot of flack when that photo was released. She looked very taken aback, somewhat demure. It's not quite the Governor Whitmer we're used to seeing. And you saw a lot of Democrats, including Attorney General Nessel, pop off on social media saying, things to the effect of this is how we can't legitimize authoritarians or things of that nature.
So a few months ago, our friend Zach Gorchow at Gongwer, he did in his weekend column, he did 15 greatest photos of Michigan politics, indelible images. And if this image of Governor Whitmer, up against the door, looking like a prisoner of war in the Oval Office, doesn't make the top 5, I mean, you should just throw out the picture of Engler and his triplets. I mean, but this was a moment that we are going to be talking about, thinking about, looking at, but I don't think the history on this is quite shut. I mean, some people are saying, look, Governor Whitmer can't run for president now. She's totally lost herself in a primary with Democrats, but we don't know the result of this. If she gets a new fighter mission at Selfridge, if she gets Trump to open up the funding to restart the construction of the barrier in Chicago, so that this was like an in-your-face moment to Pritzker, and who's a potential rival in 2028. And so if she gets some of those things, that's going to be a big victory for the governor.
Well, that's the point of this whole meeting. She came away with, if I heard the president correctly, he basically said, we're going to do a ribbon cutting at Selfridge Air Force Base. Yeah. Stay tuned. I mean, we're going to put the thing up and take care of the car. What more could she ask for? You know what? I'd stand at the back of the room, too, and take whatever he gave.
Yeah, what if he finally signs some emergency money for Northern Michigan? That was another thing that she asked for. I mean, that's money that could be coming. She could declare that was a success too. Hey, I went into enemy territory and I was able to come out with something. I saw the NBC had this headline that said disaster, that they thought that this was a PR disaster for Governor Whitmer, and egg on her face to be caught in a situation where she really didn't have control over it. But if you're not in the room, I mean, if you're not at the table, you're on the table.
Well, no, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
Well, you can do that one too.
Well, that's a good line. No, that's not an original thought. All right. I thought that was a pretty good get for her.
I think too, a lot of people have been remarking that trip was in part to meet with Trump, but then also to raise her national profile, which obviously she scheduled a speech there. But I think it's also of note that she delayed that, right, in order to go last week up north to look at the damage from the ice storm. And so I think, I think she's trying to send a message that she's putting her state first, and that her visits to D.C., the goal of those are to put the state first. Now, that speech in D.C., that felt more like putting a feeler out there for a presidential run. But I don't know.
It was really interesting when Hall was sitting, the Speaker Hall was talking about, telling him like we couldn't get anything done on Selfridge under Biden, and he kind of eventually piped in. He's like, well, in all fairness, the governor called me. So did John James, but the governor called me, and so that was really a quite telling moment. We know John James is really close with President Trump, but the other thing that we're not out of the woods with, this 90-day pause in the tariff doesn't pause the auto tariffs.
Yeah,
and
she did not get that.
Well, she did not get that, and she came to D.C., made that in her speech, and said let's have an exemption of autos and energy, which are two huge sinking bombs for Michigan, between energy that comes through oil pipelines that goes to refineries in Detroit and Toledo. That is basically all the gasoline, and Chicago. All the gasoline in Michigan is pretty much coming from a crude oil source from Alberta. And so if there is some kind of a prolonged trade war with Canada, and Canada wants to retaliate, or Trump wants to put a tariff on Canadian oil and claims you don't need it, we do need it in Michigan. And Governor Whitmer understands that, and understands this could be an energy crisis in Michigan real fast.
Let's do a deeper dive into this criticism that she's getting for basically trying to play ball with the president. She said, look, I'm as angry as everybody else on a lot of stuff that's coming out of here. Her speech did not. She didn't take on Mr. Trump by name, but she took on her policies. She's trying to thread this needle. How is she doing at it?
I think she's doing all right. I mean, she's not. Yeah. I mean, she's not gonna. She is showing diplomacy. I think that's what she's trying to do. I think she's trying to set a groundwork of her being an effective leader. Now, that is going to be perceived among some Democrats as being wishy-washy. That's going to be portrayed to some Republicans as being a poser and just being someone who is looking ahead and wants to just be governor. But she's got to be thinking about how she's going to be remembered in 5 years, in 10 years. And even if she doesn't run for president, what kind of legacy did I leave? Did I have successes as governor? And so in order to have successes, she's got to be thinking about things like Mundy Township. The president says that he doesn't want to do a big microchips factory. He wants to bury the CHIPS Act. But God, what if she could do that? What if she's able to bring that in? And the fact she's got to play footsie with Trump and swallow hard and be part of these like press conferences she doesn't want to be at, God, if she can do that, if she can make her legacy great, then it is worth it.
The executive office reaction to him doing other stuff while she was there, was anybody in the real world going to blame the governor because he did something that she didn't agree with? Do you know what I'm saying?
No,
what I'm asking?
there were people suggesting that she should have walked out, that she was in the room when he was going on basically an enemies list tirade for a little bit. He was signing executive orders, with a whole. One of them was actually for shipbuilding. The subject that she had talked about a block away in the morning. But then he was signing, an executive order trying to, increase the pressure of shower heads. And so, there was a whole host of things going on. But yeah, he went down, the 2020 conspiracy theory for a while, and then he returned, to talking to Matt and Gretchen.
I go back to the Democrats that keep going after Whitmer for this, saying again, like the whole normalizing authoritarianism. Again, governor of Michigan, you're going to have to take your lumps. We are in a position where you can't afford to sit out. You're either on the menu or you're at the table. It's true. Politics is an unfortunately dirty game. There's some things that you're going to have to do, some people you're going to have to meet with, and it's not going to be to the benefit of everybody. There's no perfect candidate. There's nobody who's going to have 100%, great photo optics all of the time. But that's the reality of getting things done in politics, and it's really easy. And I'm sorry to say, but especially there was a number of House Democrats that I saw that were really lambasting her for this. And, easy to say when you were a cohort of Democrats that at the end of the year just sort of kind of, gave up. This doing nothing is not doing something.
To that point, House Democrats right now are kind of on the menu in the state capitol. They're not in charge. They're on the sidelines, and so Whitmer is dealing with the person who is in charge, and that is Matt Hall. And so she's going into the Oval Office with Matt Hall, if that's what was necessary. Because she needs because she wants to do big deals, and she doesn't want to be having a government shutdown on October 1st.
I also think there's no denying that her behavior over the past few weeks in trying to find common ground with Trump, it puts her out there, right? Like, it is different than the approach that many Democrats are taking toward the Trump administration. And I think it's too soon to say whether that will pay off at the end of the day for the state. I think we're going to have to see, what comes of this. Is Michigan able to get CHIPS money? Is Michigan able to get federal funding for the ice storm up north? I think those chips are still falling at this point.
If the governor didn't need the president, she could be just like Dana Nessel and firing bombs. We've seen it before. She can throw bombs just like the rest of them. The fact is we need them. So
if she had walked out of that news conference, the impact would have been what?
I think it would have really damaged her ability to ever be in there again. And then you could kiss Mundy Township goodbye right away. I think right off the bat.
Yeah, absolutely that. And then on top of that, I mean, considering how much she's been lauding for Matt Hall, his roads plan, that he seems to be the only person that's kind of moving and shaking in the legislature at this moment. What would that have done with her relationship with him? He was right there as well. That would have put him in a situation where he could have turned around and said, "See, Mr. President, look what I'm dealing with." And that would have been equally as inopportune.
How about his line to the both of them that you're cooperating, in a bipartisan basis, and the true Gretchen Whitmer comes out with her laugh. Well, 70% of the time, hey, in government work, that's not bad, right?
Yeah, no, that was a really interesting, telling moment, and also pretty authentic, Gretchen Whitmer.
To the nth degree. All right, John James apparently wants the governor's job.
Yeah, he put out a social media post.
Surprised?
Surprised in what?
That he's doing governor and not Senate.
Oh, I think we heard that was the direction he was going. I thought the rollout was a little muted. He put out something on social media. I don't know if he did any interviews or anything. Maybe he's just letting it be known. He didn't do any, did he? No. I think he's just letting it be known that the big guy is in now, and I've had Trump before. So anybody else who is kind of thinking about it, I'm here. Right, so you can all go away because I'm present.
This was a strange rollout where it's just
strange.
He just literally just pulled the parachute and he's running for governor. But I know, by the way, Trump was with me before. The question is whether Trump really wants him to run for governor, and there's probably some internal politics there. Some of Trump's advisors worked for Tudor Dixon. Tudor Dixon clearly wants to run for governor or something again, wants to be in the game. And then, of course, there's other people who are running for governor, and we still don't know what Mike Cox is going to do. The former Attorney General.
Mike is running. Take it to the bank.
I mean, well, we're going to have a very large field of 5-6 people, and someone who gets 28% in a primary is going to win the nomination.
I'm just thinking of the fact, we joke about, the big guys in the race. I mean, he's never won a statewide election. He's never when he was running for Senate
close
before.
With Peters, 1.7% loss.
He did come close, but I mean, I don't think that this technically shutters the field. But then again, we talk about Mike Cox. He won for Attorney General, but lost in the race with Snyder for governor. And so we're looking at a bunch of, and then if Tudor Dixon is in on this too, we're looking at a bunch of Republican candidates that have never won a statewide race.
He came close with Peters, with Donald Trump on the ballot.
Yeah.
Then he darn near lost a congressional race with no money being spent on Carl Marlinga in 2022, and then he won pretty handily with Donald Trump on the ballot. Donald Trump's not going to be on the ballot in next year, and so what is the pathway to victory for a John James without Trump?
On this announcement thing, let me take you back to what it used to be. Candidates that ran for governor would get on an airplane at Capital City Airport, and they would fly around the state and hit every major TV market in the state in 1 day or 2 days, making an announcement, making themselves available. Hillary Clinton messed this whole thing up for everybody. She's the one that started this stuff, okay? The announcement and the beautiful thing about announcing on the internet and on Facebook or whatever is that reporters can't cross-examine that video.
You know
and
what?
that's one of the major reasons they do it. Am I right or wrong?
No, you're exactly right. The other thing, though, too, is that just putting it on Facebook, you don't really get to feel the fire that John James may have for running for governor. When you had Mallory McMorrow in that chair last week, you could tell that she really wants to be the U.S. Senator. She did interviews with everybody. She put out a book. And now you got John James, who just kind of rolls out something on social media. I mean, do we really know how badly he wants this? I mean, we could talk about how he's done in past performances. I would say his best performance was when he ran against Debbie Stabenow. He really wanted to be U.S. Senator that year, and he ran a really good race. And ever since then, I think he's been running on fumes. I don't know if he really wants this or if this is something that advisors and people around him are saying, hey, you should do this because you're going to win.
Well, I talked to Stu Sandler, who's going to be one of his handlers in this race, and I said, look, let's get him for off the record this week. Well, they're doing markup in Washington, but he said, I'm going to tell the press team that we'll get him on. And I said, okay, I'm going to hold you to that. The point is it before the election or after the election? Okay, I'm sorry. I think the candidates running for a statewide office at some point need to get away from this doing stuff on social media and talk to us. What's wrong with it?
That's why I called it the parachute ripcord here, because other candidates running for governor, Duggan, when Mike Duggan declared he's going to be an independent, he did an interview with Nolan Finley. When Eric Nesbitt came out, he did an interview with Caitlin Buss. When Jocelyn Benson came out, she did an interview with Craig Mauger. I mean, at least they did an interview with one select journalist. That's a tip. That's at least the bare minimum. But he just, like I said, pulled the ripcord and went on, put a tweet up.
Yeah, it felt rushed, right? Like maybe he was staking a claim because he knew somebody else was about to announce or something like that. And I think he kind of what Kyle was saying, like I think he put it out there to kind of say, hey, I'm here, I'm staking a claim on this nomination for the Republicans. Let's see who shows up as well.
If you're Eric Nesbitt and you heard this news, what did you say to yourself?
Well, I think he knew that it was coming, but I think he's ready to go and say, well.
No, what did he think?
Outside of uttering a 4-letter word?
That's not necessarily what I was going for, but if that what your answer is, what was he thinking?
I mean, is the front runner in the race? Fix in?
Who's the front runner in the race right now?
John James.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, and is the fix in now on me, basically. I mean, if I'm Nesbitt, that's what it feels like.
Yeah, more or less. I mean, you have a guy coming in with a lot more name recognition. I mean, maybe not much, but more name recognition, more money.
How much damage does it do to his campaign that he ran and lost in the U.S. Senate races?
I don't think it. I don't know that it does damage. I mean, I feel
to the general public, they probably don't even know.
No, and I feel like if anything, it just gave him greater name recognition being in those two races, because maybe people will remember. Oh, I kind of remember that guy's name, but not really know that he lost 2 consecutive Senate races.
Well, but the Democrats will remind the voters of that. This guy is a loser, okay? That's what the commercial will say.
But the Democrats are going to also be reminding how aligned he is with Trump. And if your 401k continues to sink in the next 6 months, we'll see how well John James's campaign takes flight.
Yeah. If I'm James, I'm white knuckling it through the next couple months, just hoping that by the what were you going to say? Sorry.
There's not a member of Congress who actually understands the tariff situation better than John James. The man's family is in the export business of powertrains and engines. They literally understand how this works. They do this for a living, and so he's going to have to be the guy who has to go out and defend the impact to the auto industry.
Does he throw the president under the bus?
Your guess is as good as mine. I mean, the state went for Trump in this last election, and we've heard time and time again, well, this is this is who we voted for, so this is who, we have to respect, like things of that nature. You heard it when Biden was first elected, where it was like, okay, well, now we're kind of leaning more Democratic. Well, Michigan elected Trump to the presidency, so how hard he poo-poos Trump, could come back to bite him with Republicans.
You know, I'm going to go back to the Nesbitt question. I think that there is a fundraising battle now that's going to take shape. And the people who have traditionally funded John James are people who wanted him to be a Republican voice in Congress, whether it was the House or the Senate. And those are different people than who would contribute to a Republican primary for governor, which is a statewide race. And Eric Nesbitt actually has connections with those people because as the leader of the Senate Republicans, he had to go to those people to raise money to try and keep a Republican majority in the Senate. John James has not had to reach those same people. So that's what I'm wondering about is the curiosity here of who, like the DeVos family, who are they going to go with? Are they going to go with somebody like Eric Nesbitt, who has gone to the wall for them every single time on every single statewide issue, or John James, who has got a national presence and is more familiar with those national issues, but we really don't know what his statewide bona fides are. So that for Nesbitt, I think he's blocking and tackling and hitting those fundraisers so that he beats John James at kind of a ground level.
But does he scare anybody out of this race? Did Kevin Rinke wake up the day after and say, well, I guess I'm not going to run for governor?
I don't think that there are certain candidates who they'll run regardless, I think, personally. I think that their own self-image won't let them not. So I'm not necessarily saying that that's Kevin Rinke, but I think that, you know, the people this was going to scare out, if we thought it was going to be some of the bigger names, I don't think that's likely.
If you've concluded that you want to be governor and you're the person for the job, nobody's going to scare you out because you live on that and thrive on that thing that lives within inside of you, right?
Yeah, it is characteristic specific to politicians, right? That they have a self-confidence that I struggle to comprehend sometimes. And I think that
That's nicely put.
Yes. So anybody who was thinking about running for this race, I don't know that John James necessarily scares them out of it.
You agree?
Yes, I think people like Perry Johnson or Kevin Rinke, if they wanted to get in, they're going to get in and say, hey, let's give it a try.
And Mike Cox will get in.
Mike Cox, yeah. Well,
you won't scare Mike Cox out of this race.
Well, no, now he's got his own millions he can put in. Why not? Here we go.
But to Kyle's point, the billionaires primary is underway now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Good show, guys. That picture, you think it's going to show up on the list, eh?
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks for watching. See more Off the Record right here next week.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Bellwether Public Relations, a full-service strategic communications agency partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and issue advocacy. Learn more at bellwetherpr.com. For more Off the Record, visit WKAR.org. Michigan public television stations have contributed to the production costs of Off the Record.